Hey and welcome to this video. So I recently finished my new template, or what means finished? I mean, I brought it to a point where I can start working with it because, to be honest, we always optimize these things on the go. And I just want to talk a little bit about the things I did and why I did them and why this video may be interesting to you, even though if you don't work with the templates at all. So let's hop right into this. Okay, so let's check this out. The first question I could see coming in is, Alex, why are you on Cubase again? So as I stated before, I use Studio One for the intuitive workflow. You know, if I just want to be inspired by, let's say, an empty canvas, if I just want to have, you know, the advantage of all that drag and drop workflow and putting instruments into my arrangement window and having effects put on top. And this is what I love Studio One using for. On the other hand, if it's movie related or video game cutscenes related work, and I just want to have a huge template, and in this case, my template here is around 1,000 tracks huge. So Cubase, to be honest, works a little bit more reliable, faster, and more efficient. So if you have any questions to that, let me know in the comments and we will talk about this. But now let's hop right into this template here. Okay, so the next point I want to talk about is why such a big template. As I already mentioned, I think I mentioned this before, this template is around 1,000 tracks huge. So am I using all these tracks all the time? The answer is clearly no. And I'm convinced that on every template, 75% of all the stuff is not being used when working on a track. However, I tried all kinds of workflows. I just had these modular setups. I worked with empty sessions where I just had bus tracks in there. I tried to do some basic templates or everything, but I don't feel at home. It's like a little bit, if I just have to browse for a sound on a hard drive, to me it feels like being a painter, an artist, you know, working in the studio, working, drawing or painting right now, at his canvas, and then suddenly he's just missing some brushes or colors, and then going to the basement and looking up at his storage room to find all the stuff that I've been missing, and then going up to my studio again. So this, for me personally, it feels like when I, you know, paint that picture and I just want to look for some sounds and just, you know, browse around on my hard drives to find this. And even though if it's just set up modular, meaning I could just drag and drop into the session or with some presets, it kind of like distracts me, and I just don't want that. It's maybe just a personal thing, but I don't like being distracted. When I just having this creative phase of just writing, I just want to have all sounds right away there and functioning. So let's take a look at the template a little bit, and I can't open all folders because there are some beta libraries in there that I don't want to spoil. But if you can see here, let's take a look at the strings. For example, I got performance samples Vista in here, and just in case I just want to have a beautiful legato, I have the Abbey Road 1 Spitfire strings in here. They are all deactivated, but we will talk about this a little bit later. I got Cinematic Studio Woodwind studio strings in here, Berlin Symphonic strings I got all in here, all articulations and flute shorts. I got Nucleus in here, Araya, Cinematic Studio solo strings. So whatever I just want to have for the job. And even though if I think I composed something, I just want to test how it sounds with another library, I can quickly switch parts and all these things. So also let's check a little bit of brass here. So I got Junk XL brass, I got Cinematic Studio brass. I also got that mixture folder here of Caspian, Angry Brass and Trailer Brass. And as for the woodwinds, I got Berlin woodwinds in here, Cinematic Studio woodwinds, also again the Abbey Road 1 woodwinds. But as I said, a template like this is never finished. There will be always work on this. I will always improve this, and if possible we'll do a video about my little improvements here. So also keep in mind that Cubase counts the bus tracks here as, you know, tracks, but also leaves out the disabled tracks. It doesn't count the disabled tracks. So when I say around about 1,000 tracks, I'm talking about instrument tracks only, to not, you know, to not confuse you. So also, let's, as you can see, if I open this SFX folder here, for example, I put all these libraries into subfolders as I showed above here on the strings and so on. So also for the SFX, I got Devastator effects in here, and For some, it seems to be like MIDI tracks, and some are grayed out. We will talk about this in a second. So, but my main point right now is not, to brag around with like 1,000 tracks or whatever. You should work with whatever feels right. What I want to show you is if I save the session right now and I click Save Now, it's just round about 1 second of saving time for the entire template right now. And I just want to show you what I did, why I did it. And of course, you don't have to follow everything if you are curious about building a template. But I just want to talk about all the little things that led up to building a template that is like 1,000 tracks big and doesn't need, surprisingly, not that much memory as you would expect. Okay, so in general, this template consists of 2 parts. So as you could already see, I have some MIDI tracks in here and some grayed out tracks. So I built one part, let's say, of the template inside Vienna Ensemble Pro. I will just pull it up here for a second. I got one instance for strings, I got one instance for brass, I got one for woodwinds, I also got one for orchestra percussions, for movie percussions and hits, and also miscellaneous, which would be stuff like concept libraries like Time Micro or some DM307 kits, some of the Aeon hits or menus, some of the Devastator trailer effects, and so on. So now the important thing to understand is, why did I use Vienna Ensemble Pro? Basically, all the instruments in Vienna Ensemble Pro are instruments that I don't need to tweak, meaning something like synth, and I just want to change, for example, the cutoff or anything. And because I don't need to tweak these instruments inside Vienna Ensemble Pro, I can set all of these instances to decoupled. So as you can see here, these little 2 arrows and the exclamation mark, this means that all of these instances here are decoupled. So to put it like this, Vienna Ensemble Pro doesn't care what's happening inside Cubase besides receiving the MIDI information and sending back the audio to Cubase. And Cubase doesn't care about what's going on in Vienna Ensemble Pro besides the MIDI and audio part. But if I save my session inside Cubase, it does not save the template in Vienna Ensemble Pro. This allows me to drastically reduce the saving time of my project. So the next point is, and I have to thank Pedro Camacho for this tip. What he did, as you can see here, you see all these little red symbols inside all of these contact patches here. So what he did was basically purging all of the samples inside contact. You can also do this if you're using the sign player here, for example. You can hit purge and unload basically all of the memory needed by the library. So basically you can unload the entire library and just keep the preset. So let's pay attention to the cellos here. I'm hopping over to Cubase and I just play the cello legato, the Vista cello here. So because I'm using SSD drives, the sample load that quickly that you don't even realize that there is some little time, some little delay going on. And if I go back to Vienna Ensemble Pro, you can see that the samples are being loaded into the contact instance that I'm currently using. If I just play a little bit more, you can see that the memory is going up here. So basically, I'm just loading the samples that I currently need for this project. So in Contact, you quickly hit this little button here and purge all samples, but you can do this for the entire Contact instance by hitting that little disk symbol here, and you go to Global Purge, and then you say Purge All Samples, and it instantly unloads all the Contact instances from the samples. Puts all the samples out of Contact. So you just keep that, let's say, Contact ready, and as soon as you trigger some notes, it starts loading the samples. And because I am loading my Vienna Ensemble Pro template right in the morning and all of it is purged, all of the instruments are purged, and please keep in mind, we just triggered a few of the cello sounds here, but when I open the task manager, and you can see that Vienna Ensemble Pro roundabout uses 7 gigs right now for all of the stuff that is going on here. So basically I'm hosting lots of instruments in here and have them ready to be triggered. And of course, keep in mind, since I have all of these instances decoupled, it means that this template is independent from whatever digital audio workstation I'm using, no matter if it's Cubase Studio One or whatever. This is totally independent from that. So you have to create this template, and this is a little bit of a the annoying stuff you have to take care of. If you just import all of these instances, and later on you just have to go into them one by one and purge all of the samples, and then save this template again to be ready the next time you fire up your Vienna Ensemble Pro template. It loads with purged program patches. So now let's hop back to Cubase and let's take care of the other part that drastically reduces the saving or loading time of your project. Let's hop to the synth folder in here, and as you can see, there are lots of tracks grayed out, and this simply means that these tracks are deactivated. So if I just jump in here and just in case if you don't know that function, if you never heard of that function, it's available in Cubase. I know this is available, of course, in Studio One. There should be also, basically all of the digital audio workstations should have this implemented by now. And also, don't confuse activation or deactivation of tracks. Don't confuse this with freezing or bypassing the instrument or anything. It really means, as you can see here, enabling track. And if I enable that track, then this Repro 1 instance here, for example, is active. If I just right click again and disable that track, it means that no CPU or no memory is being used to host this VST. The same goes for contact instances, of course. So I got some SFX patches here of Devastator. So let me just deactivate this instance here. And as you can see, this little patch, let's zoom out a little bit. This patch here, the Soft Brahms patch, contains a little menu where I can choose files from. So since, again, because my template in Vienna Ensemble Pro is decoupled, it means if I pick, for example, Bram 10 or 11 for a project, it does mean that if I save my session, if I would host that inside Vienna Ensemble Pro, it would not save this preset with my track. Therefore, I'm doing that mixture of having all the stuff that I don't need to change inside Vienna Ensemble Pro and all the patches that I want to change, all the instruments that I want to tweak, I'm hosting as instrument tracks inside Cubase, but I deactivate them. Therefore, they don't need any CPU, any power, any memory or whatever, but it will keep the presets. I am totally aware, let's disable this track again. I'm totally aware that I could use coupled instances. Again, to make this clear, the difference between decoupled and coupled instances inside Vienna Ensemble Pro is that if I have a coupled instance, I could tweak instruments, and this will be kept with my Cubase or Studio One session. If I save that session and load up the Vienna Ensemble Pro template, the settings I made or the changes I made for this specific track will be kept. But sorry, I like to keep things easy, and this is a little bit too difficult for me. So I decided to have all the tracks that I don't need to change inside Vienna Ensemble Pro, and all the instruments, all the effects, all the libraries that I want to tweak inside Cubase or Studio One. So let's quickly talk about the routing that is going on in my template. And as we talked about all these folders before, basically got the same structure in my mixer for, let's say, the stem buses. So I got one bus for strings, I got one bus for brass, woodwinds, orchestral percussions, melodic percussions, harp. All of these go into an orchestral bus, just in case if I feel like just throwing one instance of reverb onto the orchestral bus. We will talk about reverb in a second. It's not a really complex or a complicated setup either. So then we have a bus that is movie percussions. We have drums, bass, choir, synth, hits, world instruments, and special effects. So it only happens that companies ask me to either send all instruments as separate tracks, or as stems, so I can quickly export whatever they want. Another important point to mention is that you can hardly see any insert effects put on the buses or any of the instruments already. And the simple reason for this is how can I know how the final track sounds right when I start with an empty session? You know, what is the reason to put this in an allegoric sense? If I just put like 5 spoons of salt ready on my hand to throw it on my next meal, it doesn't make sense when I want to eat yogurt with fruits, for example. You know, I don't need salt for that. So why should I prepare that already? And in my opinion, it doesn't make sense to pre-process instruments or, embrace the awesomeness of some legato patches of some libraries, of some string libraries, when hearing them isolated, when you don't know how it will sound in the final mix. So if I can recommend something, always check out the final, or if you are finished with your track, check out the final arrangement, check out the final mix that is going on, and then start processing stuff, because most of the time it just takes like a little EQ correction on the general orchestral bus. Maybe you just need to, put some surgical EQ on the mastering bus or anything. You don't know these things before. That's why I would always save up for the final moment when it comes really to the mixing process. Okay, next up would be reverb, and I don't want to get into some specific settings. As you can see here, I loaded this patch of Cinematic Room's Professional Philharmonic Stage. I put some pre-delay value in here. I'm not really sure if I will keep that. All I did, I don't care about any of these settings yet. I just have these as insert effects. Yes, you heard right, as insert effects on these buses here. And I am aware there are all kinds of several or different methods on how to set up reverbs. Most people use them on send and returns because then they have some very dry, let's put it like this, very dry instruments, and they need to put like a more reverb signal on these and all this. And to be honest, I don't care about all this. I know also people that put like an EQ before the reverb on the send and return bus so that they can EQ the reverb. To be honest, I don't care about this. I never cared about this. This is how I work. And I really recommend you to not overthink the reverb process. Before you start anything else, just set up an orchestral bus, route all your orchestral instruments to make sure they are panned correctly, they are mixed correctly, and then put some slight reverb on the orchestral bus and see how it sounds. And if it sounds good, and also if professionals say, if you show your track to a professional out there and they say, yes, this sounds good, this sounds convincing, that's totally cool to do, then it is. There is no reason to overcomplicate setups only because others are doing it. The most important thing is that it has to match to your workflow. And it doesn't matter if there is some famous composer sitting there and say, I always do it like this, because that person may have a mixing engineer that is just taking care of all of the tracks from that person and does the final delivery of the music to, let's say, the movie company. There is no reason, if you do video games or if you do trailer music and you just have to deliver stems, final production stems, or the final master to your company when you do all the mixing yourself. Why would you want to go through this setup if you don't really need it? I mean, please don't get me wrong. If you are a professional composer right now watching this video and you shake your head, of course, if you know what you're doing, if you have that EQ on the send and return, on the reverb send returns, and you just want to get, you like a room and you want to get rid of like a 200 or 300 hertz bump of some specific impulse response, of a reverb impulse response, then of course you know what you do, and of course there's nothing wrong with it. But in my opinion, the entire question or the quest for the right reverb, there is a lot of overthinking going on, especially if you are an aspiring composer. You check out, how all the professionals doing it, and then you're totally confused, or even you mess things up when you work with send and returns. Maybe you have your reverb instance here and you didn't put it to like 100% wet, otherwise you get into phasing problems and all these things. This can easily happen, and this doesn't happen when you just put for example, a reverb instance simply on your orchestral bus, on your master bus, assuming you just have an orchestra track going, and you will see how good it actually sounds without going through all that mess. And there is still enough time later on to take care about all these complicated settings. But I mean, of course, think about whatever you want about this entire reverb discussion, but I can say no customer, no client, never ever within these 15 years that I'm doing my job complained about my reverb setup. Okay, last but not least, two very important things. One is to protect your hearing. I like to have a limiter. It doesn't matter what limiter, I just like the invisible limiter because you can set the latency to low, but have always a limiter on your stereo output to prevent some hearing damage, just in case you just slip off a fader or whatever happens, you know, there is some library or some VST going crazy and you just have some loud noise going on. You just have a limiter on here that prevents clipping. The other thing is that, let me open that rack here and let's open this pre-filters gain phase menu for a second. You can see that I reduced or added a little bit of gain for all of these instruments, and I'm kind of like doing a little bit of, let's say, gain staging, so I get more or less the same levels from all of these libraries. And especially when it comes to orchestra, it helps a little bit to balance your mix, to balance the input signal right from the beginning. Okay, just one more thing. If your argument to not build a template is that you would never be able to navigate through all of this, just keep in mind, and this works kind of similar also in Studio One, you have Control F here in Cubase, and this opens this little menu. And since let's close this for a second, and since I got like abbreviations for all of my libraries, if I type, for example, NUC for nucleus strings, and I just want to hop to the spiccato strings, I hit tab and go down here and hit this. I'm right at this patch, so there is no excuse for you. Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your time. If you have any questions, feel free to use the comment section below. I would be really happy if you give this video a thumbs up. I would be even more happy if you subscribe to my channel, just in case if you haven't already. I hope you enjoyed the video. Take care and see you on my next one. Bye.